What we are about to do is build views that will let our users create and update information. This means the view will have a form inside. As we saw in the last module, we can use the HTML.begin form helper to create forms that issue an HTTP post or an HTTP GET. In these edit scenarios, we want to use HTTP post because it's only safe to modify information on the server during a post operation. We wouldn't want a GET request to change the name of a restaurant or create a new review, for example. We want those operations to be a post. So a form with a post action and a few inputs inside will force the browser to collect the input names and values and include them in the body of the post. Unlike the GET request, which we saw in the last module, we'll take those name-value pairs and put them in the query string. We're going to have them in the body of the post, and ultimately that information will reach the default model binder in ASP.NET MVC, because we are going to have a controller action that requires some parameters. As we saw earlier in this course, the default model binder can see that we need this parameter. It's a review, and it will find all the information about a review in the incoming post request. The end result is that we can have a review object pop out of the request and into our controller action. There's a few details I'm glossing over at this point, but we'll see some of those details when we get inside the code. Inside of the application, I want to give the user the ability to click on a restaurant name in this list of restaurants and be able to go to the details about that restaurant. And in the details view, I want to display the reviews for that restaurant and allow the user to create a new review. So this is a little bit of work that we need to pull off. Let's go to the index view that's displaying that list of restaurants. And first I'm going to clean it up a bit. Let's get rid of the drop-down list that was showing the states so they could select a restaurant by state. Let's get rid of the link at the bottom of the page that was allowing us to show restaurants just in Maryland. We'll clean that up, and then I'm going to take off the first column of this table because I don't want to display edit, details, and delete like we currently are. Instead, I want the user to be able to click on the item name to be able to get to details. So let's create an HTML.action link, and the text of this link will be the item.name. If someone clicks on that, they need to go to the details action of the restaurant controller. We need to pass along the ID of the restaurant that we want to see details about. We'll do that by specifying route values. So let's new up an anonymously typed object that has an ID property equal to item.id. And we'll pass along null for the HTML attributes. So just by doing that and saving the view, I should be able to come out and refresh this page. And now I can click on Yellow Brick Bank Restaurant, and that will take me to a page /restaurant/details/1. The controller action is not implemented yet, so let's do that next. We will need an action called details. We should expect that an ID parameter arrives at this action. Inside of here, we can say that the model, the restaurant that we're looking for, is db.restaurants, and we want the single restaurant whose restaurant ID equals that incoming ID value. Then we can simply return a view with that model. If I do a build, we're in good shape. The build succeeded, so let's go ahead and add a view. It's going to be the details view. Use the Razor View Engine, strongly typed against a restaurant. And this time the scaffold template that I want is going to be details. So let's see what we have so far. We have a details view. If I refresh this page that was currently broken, it should display information now. And there we have details, restaurant. The name is Yellow Brick Bank Restaurant. Now you might be wondering, what happened to the address? Well, it turns out that the scaffolding templates in Visual Studio are not very aggressive about drilling into a complex type. And we can fix this any number of ways. We could come out here and set up our own divs and display model.address, model.address.city, model.address.country. But let me show you something else we can try. I'm going to use HTML.displayFor and say that for the model that I have, I want to display model.address. This displayFor helper is actually rather powerful. It assumes you're working against the model property. And so what we need here is a Lambda expression that says, given the model object, what do I want to display on it? Well, I want to display the address And what display4 can do at runtime is reflect on that particular object, look at all the properties on it, look at some metadata that's available for that, and render a display for me. So just by using display4, if I refresh this page, I now have Yellow Brick Bank Restaurant, there's the street, the city, the state, and the country. It's not the ideal display that we would want for an address, but we'll come back and fix that later once we get through creating a review. So we said that we wanted to display all of the reviews for the restaurant on this page. So let me take that details H2 tag and put it down here at the bottom because we don't need this page to say details. Instead, we'll use it down here and we'll say reviews. And now what we need to do is loop through the review that is in the model.reviews collection. And if you remember from the previous module, we have already created an _review.cshtml partial, and we can use that to render a review. There is one problem though. We are currently in the details view of the restaurant controller. _review is in the reviews folder. If I want to make this available to the restaurant controller views, I can simply move it into the shared folder. Now it's available everywhere. And what I should be able to do is just say html.partial, using the _review partial, render that review for me. Now let's see how far we've gotten. So refresh the page again. And now I have the reviews down here. Now at the bottom of the page, we can add an action link to say create a new review. And when you do this, call the create action on the reviews controller. And I need to pass along the ID of the restaurant where I want this review created. I could just pass that along as ID and accept it as an ID parameter in the action, but it gets a little bit confusing because when you're inside of the reviews controller, when you see an ID parameter, you typically think of that as the ID of the review that you want to look at. So I'm going to change this around just a little bit and say pass a parameter restaurant ID that is equal to model.id. And again, no HTML attributes to specify. And what should happen is we'll get a link that is something like /reviews/create query string restaurant ID equals 3. Let's try it out. Refresh the page once more. Let's try to create a new review. And we are looking in the right place. And you can see the query string up there, restaurant ID equals 1. That's the primary key of the restaurant that we're trying to add the review to. Let's go implement that action. Now the reviews controller, if you remember, Visual Studio, when we added this to the project, we selected a checkbox that said go ahead and provide us with some default scenarios. So Visual Studio gave us action methods to implement delete and edit and details. We came back and we provided an implementation for edit that actually worked. That was a couple modules ago. Now we need to handle the create scenario. Just like edit, there's going to be a version of create that responds to an HTTP GET and a version of create that responds to a post. The version that responds to a GET, that's essentially saying, get me something I can use to enter review information. So all we need to do here is provide a new empty review, and the user will be able to enter that information, click a button, and that will post back to this version of create where we need to save that information. Now, where do we save it? Well, first of all, we need to attach it to the proper restaurant. And remember that we have a restaurant ID floating around in the query string. It's going to be available on this create action too, but we're not going to take advantage of it. It's still going to be there when the user clicks the save button. It's going to post back to /review/create and still have that query string value there. So we can use it here. We can also receive a parameter that represents the new review. So just by placing that here, the ASP.NET and MVC model binder will say, you need a review. Let me look around and see if I can find any information about a review and create this object for you. And that means that we can first look up the restaurant where this needs attached. So we can do that by going to db.restaurants.single. Find me the single one that has the ID equal to that restaurant ID parameter. And when we have that, we can go to the restaurant and say these reviews you have, you need to add a new review into that collection. And then we tell the entity framework essentially to save all the changes. And if all that works and there's no exception, we will redirect to the index action of this controller that displays all the reviews. That may or may not be where we want to go. We'll figure that out later. Let's just see if this works for now. So let's add the view. It's going to be the create view with the Razor View Engine strongly tied to a review. The scaffold template that I want is create. And that gives me a view that lets the user enter a rating and a body and a dining date. So everything looks like it's there. Let us do a build and come out and try this link again. Create a new review for me. And it looks like I should be able to enter something like 10. Great. I dined there in 2012. And that creates the review for me. We used to have 2 reviews, now we have 3 reviews in the database. It's not immediately obvious here, so let's try it again. Let's come out to restaurants. Come to the Yellow Brick Bank, and there you can see the 3 reviews. Let's create one more review. We'll give it a rating of 9 this time. And we'll say the body is perfect. Dining date, again, 1/1/2012. And you might be asking, is that date in the future? And I'll say, yes, it is. And you might then say, well, how can we prevent that? And I'll say, we'll talk about that in just a bit. But when I hit create, again, we successfully added that into the database. Now we're up to 4 reviews. And how does all this magic work? It's all because if you look at this form that is used to create a new review, if we look at the source code behind it, one thing you'll notice is that the input for the rating has a name of rating, and the input for the body has a name of body. And so when the request arrives here at the reviews controller, the default model binder in MVC can pull those pieces of information out and put them in this review object that it passes into us. The model binder really makes life easy because we don't need to dig around in the query string for this restaurant ID or in the posted form values for this review information. It just puts it all together for us.